to remove the wheel, use a 17mm socket. Take these lug studs out. When you go to take the last one out, you might want to hold the wheel so it doesn't fall. And slide it off. Using some needle nose pliers, I'm just going to grab the pad sensor and slide it up. There's a little clip right there that goes on that. And just slide this out of the way. You can take this off the bleeder. There's a clip right here. Just use a pry bar. Just pry this clip off. You can also use some pliers. Take that off. There's a couple caps covering where the slides are, where the bolts are. Just take those off. Use a screwdriver if you need to, or a pick. Take a 7mm Allen socket. Loosen up the bolts for the caliper. And just take a pry bar, just pry the caliper over a little bit so it's easier to remove. Make sure the bolts are out. And slide that off. You can take the brake pads off. Slide those out. And take a brake caliper hanger and slide it on the coil spring or wherever you can hang it from, just so there's no tension on the brake hose. Now take these two bolts out. Use a 16mm socket. Take those out and slide the bracket off. Take this screw out, use a 6mm Allen socket. Slide that out. And take a hammer, just give the rotor a tap. And slide the rotor off. In the back, lift this panel up, out of the way. We've got to lower the spare tire, so loosen this up. Then take this and carefully twist this, and this will lower down. It's going to be a little heavy. We can pull the spare tire out. Now through the base of the spare tire holder, I'm going to use a 13mm socket. Take these 3 bolts out. And just tip this down. I'll just twist it out of the way. I can just hang like that. Now I'm going to take these bolts out for the bracket that holds the sway bar on. Use an E12 socket. And take these ones out on the other side as well. Remove the lower sway bar link nut. Use a 16mm socket. And if the stud starts spinning, you want to use a wrench. You can slide that off and out of the way. Take these axle bolts out. Use an 8mm Allen socket. And take those all out. There'll be a little bracket right here. You want to take those out as well. And once you pull those out, just slide this up. Now before we take the axle nut off, I'm just going to use a punch and a hammer and just try to pry those over. It's just peened over a little bit. Take the nut off. Now slide the axle out. Just like that. Now slide the CV shaft in. Slide that in place. Over on the differential, get this lined up. Get the bolt holes lined up. And get the bolts started. Just let me turn this to the side. Makes it a little easier. And I'm going to torque these to 44 foot-pounds. You want to replace this with a new nut. Get the axle nut on. I'm putting a pry bar in between two of the lug studs to prevent the hub from spinning. Tighten this down. Then you want to torque this nut to 320 foot-pounds. Do the best you can. Now just take a chiseler or punch and just peen over the edge of the nut. And put the sway bar link back into the sway bar. I'll just take an 18mm wrench this time to keep the stud from spinning. And take the sway bar, get the bushings lined up, and get the bolts started. Now spin the spare tire holder around and slide the bracket back in place and get those 3 bolts started and snug those down. Now put the spare tire back up. The strap that goes around it. Slide it through. Just like that. Pull it up, tighten it up. And pull the spare tire up. And twist this lock. Take this piece and screw it back in. Just snug it down. That's good. Put this cover back on. Just take a wire brush and you want to clean up the hub surface if there's any rust on there or corrosion. I'll do a nice thin coat of anti-seize just on the hub surface. Now install the rotor on the car. If you have to adjust the parking brake, you can use the adjuster right there if you have to tighten or loosen it. That lined up. You want it just barely touching. Then put this screw in. Making sure this is flat and snug it down. Now I'm just going to clean the bracket up. Use a wire brush. Just put a thin coat of grease on the pad where the pads are going to slide. Same on this side. Slide the bracket over the rotor. And put the bolts back in. Get those started. And torque these to 48 foot-pounds. Take the brake hanger off the caliper. You want to use a caliper compressing tool. Nice and slow, compress the caliper. Take the brake pads. This one goes on the outside, the one with the bracket on it goes into the piston, just like that. Before we put this on, just take these slide pins out and just clean the pin up. Use some brake parts cleaner and a rag, wipe it down. Take a little brake caliper grease, grease up the pin, and do the same on the other one. Slide that in position. Now torque these to 22 foot-pounds. Put these covers on and put the bracket on. Kind of get it in place and just push it on. You can use pliers if you need to. Now line the brake pad sensor up with the brake pads. Push it in and secure it around the bleeder screw. Put the wheel on. Get the lug nuts on. Now I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 110 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. I'll go around again, double check.